What country? China. I think China's a pretty good place.
Do you?
Yeah.
Do you think the Uyghurs would agree with you? For the Chinese example, aren't they building houses and roads and other things at an alarmingly quick rate because the workers there are on very low wages and possibly being abused?
The median 65-year-old in China has a nicer quality of life than the median 65-year-old in this country. I think it's quite possible, yeah.
Where in the world has communism proved to be a luxury to anyone?
Well, I think China's done pretty well. It's taken 850 million people out of poverty in, 35 years? It's producing the world's leading EVs and lithium-ion battery companies.
It's not luxury communism, though, is it? It's capitalism masquerading as communism.
No, it's not capitalism.
一场在电讯报引发热议的争论，让中国模式再次成为焦点。英国记者卡米拉·托米尼与作家、政治评论员亚伦·巴斯塔尼展开了一场针锋相对的交锋，双方围绕中国经济发展、人权争议以及中国到底是资本主义还是社会主义展开激烈讨论。一方认为中国的发展背后存在问题，另一方则拿出住房、制造业、脱贫和产业升级等数据进行反驳。这场对话也成为观察西方如何看待中国崛起的一面镜子。那么，当西方媒体习惯性审视中国时，是否也应该重新审视自身的问题？今天就让我们来拆解这场充满争议的中西观点碰撞。
I like the idea, of course, of housing security. I think home ownership's good.
Yeah?
Oh yeah, but again, look at the countries. Again, your viewers or listeners will maybe be surprised. Go on to Wikipedia, countries with the highest rates of home ownership. Cuba, Romania, Bulgaria, China, Poland.
What, you're saying that communism has created an environment where more people are owning their own homes?
It's created an environment where they have a really high supply of housing, which is really interesting.
Okay.
So we had a housing bubble up until 2008. Here's the interesting thing.
At a consequence to whom, though? Say, for instance, in China.
What country? China. I think China's a pretty good place.
Do you?
Yeah.
Do you think the Uyghurs would agree with you?
Do I think the Uyghurs? I'm sure some would, some wouldn't.
None of them would.
I've met some Uyghurs who say it's all, a conspiracy theory. I don't agree with that. I've also spoken to activists.
You're not denying, to use a progressive phrase, the lived experience of the average Uyghur.
I don't know the average Uyghur. I've never been to, Xinjiang. I've spoken to activists on both sides.
Extensively, right? And talked about their plight and talked about how they're subject to human rights abuses. Ironically, making the solar panels and other energy efficient gubbins that we need to fire our net zero dream. There's an irony there, isn't there? There's an irony that the net zero dream, and
and you don't, have to be a radical socialist to think it shouldn't be billionaires and oligarchs. It could be a relatively widespread sort of affluence, like we saw after the Second World War.
But back to the Chinese example, aren't they building houses and roads and other things at an alarmingly quick rate because the workers there are on very low wages and possibly being abused?
I've never been to China.
But you've got experience of China having abused the human rights of its own citizens.
So again,
right?
If I speak to people from China, I've spoken to British people who've been to China, and they say, I would rather be born in Britain, the whole John Rawls, veil of ignorance. But actually, having seen how older people live there, I think it's perhaps the best place in the world to be an old person. That's what they've said to me. But again, I don't want to talk with kind of, real sincerity because I've never been to China. But I think we have to countenance the possibility that actually the median 65-year-old in China has a nicer quality of life than the median 65-year-old in this country. I think it's quite possible, yeah.
Okay, and when it comes to mining for rare earth minerals and for some of the materials that we need, for instance, to kind of power this green revolution, and we're going to have to power it somehow, aren't we? Because you're leaning into the idea of more and more automation, more and more AI. We need a huge stock of energy for that and then some. Are you troubled by the contradiction at play here between progressives pushing for a net zero dream that might cause others in developing nations to live extremely miserable lives trying to propel it forward?
100%.
What do we do about that?
Well, the sort of ground zero for this stuff is the Democratic Republic of Congo. So things like cobalt, tantalum, nickel. It's just, it's like the Saudi Arabia of these metals. And you have, I think they're called artisanal miners. You hear the word artisanal, you think it's quite, like artisanal coffee. But this is 12-year-olds just getting bits of metal from the ground. Actually, there are whole towns and villages where people have found these deposits underneath the towns, and they start mining under their houses. And the houses start collapsing. It's just dystopian. And I will talk very positively about what China's done with electric vehicles, or how quickly it's developed 5G, or how quickly it's developed high-speed rail. But if you look at China's role in the Democratic Republic of Congo as one example, horrific.
Yeah, so why are you giving them the benefit of the doubt in China? Why are you giving them the benefit of the doubt over the Uyghurs? Don't you think that the development of these electric cars and all of these solar panel and other, frankly, there's an irony here, by the way, because they're building these coal-fired power stations while at the same time exporting all of this gear to countries like us that lap it up, that want it hook, line and sinker without asking the real questions about who's being abused in the process. So why are you giving them the benefit of the doubt in China with their own people and the Uyghurs, and not giving them the benefit of the doubt in the Congo? Why would they behave differently in the Congo than they would of their own country?
Just from what I've read. But
you're forgiving them this because they're communists, and you can't bear the idea of communists being bad people.
No, communists have been very bad people.
Okay, good. I'm glad we agree on that. Well, there are some on the left that don't think Stalin was that bad. And actually, look at Jeremy Corbyn in his bloody little red book. Oh, Chairman Mao. Actually, he was a big, friendly, cuddly bloke who wasn't responsible for millions of deaths during the Cultural
did some
Revolution.
evil stuff, but he was also, he was one of the great historical figures of the 20th century.
Imagine doing that. Imagine saying that about Hitler.
But in what regard?
Well, that's a bit like saying
Hitler took over. Okay,
Hitler
now you make your
was
argument,
an
I'll respond.
evil Nazi, but he was a good orator.
He was a good orator. He was. I mean, I'm not going to say he was a bad orator. Did he? If you look at Germany, the country he takes over in 1933, very highly advanced. Nobel Prize winners coming out of your ears, many of which were Jewish.
Yeah.
The most sophisticated society in Europe at that point. And look where it ends up in 1945. Smashed, pulverized, 10 million Germans plus dead, millions more having to be displaced after 1945 to create nice clean borders. Okay, then let's compare that to the legacy of Mao or Stalin. I don't think it's actually, in terms of what they did to their country, I don't think it's incomparable, isn't it?
Well,
Stalin
and Mao were both responsible for millions of deaths. One of the characteristics of communism is such a degree of state control that everyone is expected to do the same thing and be dictated to as to how they live their lives and where they live and how much they should earn and who they should work for.
Is that how China works?
I mean, is that a misrepresentation of communism?
Well, I think some
because
systems
to bring
have been
the
like
conversation full circle, of course, there are many, many people on the right who think that the idea of even saying luxury and communism in the same sentence is an oxymoron. Where in the world has communism proved to be a luxury to anyone?
Well, I think China's done pretty well. It's taken 850 million people out of poverty in, 35 years? It's producing the world's leading EVs and lithium-ion battery companies.
It's not luxury communism, though, is it? It's capitalism masquerading as communism.
No, it's not capitalism.
It's political.
It's a market system.
It's political communism. It's state control of people's individual liberties, but it's absolutely free market capitalist economics.
Capitalism.
Of course it is.
It's not capitalism.
Well, have you ever seen any of the Chinese people coming over and buying up Hermes handbags and Gucci scarves?
Lots of that's money laundering, by the way.
Well, yeah, which is, I presume you would imagine to suggest, is a capitalist invention in itself, moving pockets of money around different enterprises in order to disguise its provenance and indeed probably avoid tax.
Because they've got capital controls and there's all kinds of funny...
But you cannot be referring to the communism of China in the same vein as the communism, say, of Cuba.
Well, Cuba's had challenges for different reasons, right?
Has it ever been luxurious for anyone other than, I don't know, Castro?
Well, maybe a few mojitos down, I might say yes, but it's obviously had challenges, and I don't think because of its proximity to the United States, its lack of energy resources, etc., it's had problems. It's different. I think you can have a proper conversation about this stuff when it comes to the Soviet Union or China, because these were basically self-sufficient economies. So they succeed or fail on their access to resources. The DDR is another example. East Germany. East Germany had very, very few natural resources. If the DDR had the oil of Saudi Arabia, yeah, of course it would be a really successful country, because it had really high human capital. It had really impressive advanced manufacturing. Carl Zeiss lenses, which we use in all our phones, was an East German firm. So it's a broad conversation, but you're saying, has it ever worked anywhere? I would say that China today is a market economy, but it's not a capitalist economy, and we can learn a lot from it.
I don't know why you're arguing that it's not a capitalist economy.
So
it's based on free markets. It's based on the creation of wealth to create jobs.
So, if you look at a company like Huawei or Cattle, a big player in batteries, or BYD, because banks in China are socialized, they can give very low interest rate loans to many of these companies, large and small, and that allows these companies to sell products with razor-thin margins, but of course at huge scale.
Yeah.
Companies in the West can't do that for a ton of reasons because of, we have shareholders, because the costs of accessing credit are much higher.
Well,
101
also
reasons.
we can't compete with low energy costs in Chinese factories fueled by carbon.
Chinese energy costs aren't necessarily that. A great example of
Chinese energy costs are considerably lower
much
than
lower.
ours.
Taiwan, high energy costs actually, but they have this $1 trillion company with
well, they're making
TSMC.
all these microchips. But
Yeah.
hang on, I must take issue with this. Do you think the workers on the factory floor in China, or indeed in the sweatshops, think that there's anything luxurious about the communism?
Their
You're
system
being very
is
selective.
No, I'm really not. I think
Yeah,
if you look at India and you look at China, I know, and I'm sure if anybody, and you as well, if you're being totally honest, what country would you rather have been born in the last 30 years? I think China is an economic miracle when you look at the last 50 years.
Under no circumstances on earth would I wish I was born in China in the last 30 years.
Rather than India.
Can you address? Oh, I see. Not rather than the UK.
Well, no, but the UK had several hundred years head start.
Fine. But can you just answer the question about the actual workers on the factory floor and indeed in the sweatshops of China, in the Xi'an factories and beyond? You think they're enjoying luxury communism?
I don't think the process they go through is any different to what happened with this country's working class over the late 19th and early 20th century.
No, I'm
it's
talking
the same.
about it now. You're saying that
It's the same.
China is a beacon of luxury communism. And
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay,
You said
what
you
are
asked,
you saying?
You said where has communism worked? And I said China is not a communist state; it's a socialist market state, but it's not a capitalist state. And so you say, well, why is it not capitalist? Because capital, the interests of capital, don't direct the political priorities of the country. They do in this country.
I said, where did luxury communism work? Don't you think that using the term luxury to describe the communism in China that subjugates the worker at the bottom end of the ladder is an insult? Is an insult.
Luxury communism. The book doesn't. That would have been a great book.
Hang on, we can rewind the tape, Your Honour. I did say, where can you cite an example of luxury communism working in the world?
I thought you were saying
and
communism.
You said
My apologies.
China.
Luxury communism is the title of my book. I mean, it would be fabulous if that was the case. Then I could it'd be one page. I'd be like, Google China, read the Wikipedia article. There you go, end of the book. I would have saved lots of time.
回看这场访谈，争论的核心其实并不只是中国是不是资本主义这么简单，而是两个不同世界观之间的碰撞。但背后其实是在讨论一个更大的问题：中国的发展模式为什么能够在几十年内改变全球格局？不可否认，中国的发展过程中存在争议和挑战。但同样不能忽视的是，从制造业崛起、基础设施建设到数亿人口生活水平提升，中国已经成为世界经济中无法绕开的力量。而西方国家在批评中国的同时，也不得不面对自身的问题：产业外流、住房压力、基础设施老化，这些现实困境同样摆在眼前。中国模式是否能够持续，还有待未来验证。但可以确定的是，过去那个只能跟随西方发展的中国已经不存在了。这场争论真正值得思考的是，而面对崛起的中国，世界究竟应该继续用旧有标准审视它，还是重新理解一个正在改变全球格局的新现实？